Hey everybody, this is Terry McBride, and you're listening to the Neon Eon.
Hey y'all, I'm Thomas Mooney, that was Terry McBride, and this is the Neon Eon. Welcome back. As we enter the second month of existence here at the Neon Eon, I first have to say thank you so much for being as interested in this specific era of country music as I've been. And of course, a giant thank you to the artists and songwriters who have taken the time to sit down for a minute and answer all these questions of mine and have a genuine conversation. You know, after the bulk of this interview with Terry was done, we were just chatting for a minute and he was asking how I had gotten into journalism and how I had been doing with getting the Neon Eon off the ground. I told him, of course, that it's been going pretty well, all things considered. Solid trajectory considering that, you know, this doesn't necessarily have a Joe Rogan level of corporate sponsorship just yet. Hopefully we're getting there one day. But, you know, it's one of those things for me to start a podcast about 90s country and obsess over it and think it's a pretty good idea. I thought it was a pretty good idea from the get-go. That's all kind of the easy part, though. It's an entirely different thing to get the artists and the songwriters and everyone to be willing participants. By no means is it easy to enter and navigate this world, but honestly, I've been pleasantly surprised by the feedback from the artists and management and PR and so on. You send enough emails, you're going to be disappointed, but you're also going to hit the ball a few times as well. So yeah, you just got to keep it all in mind and keep that perspective. So yeah, just a giant thank you to all of y'all, whether you're a listener, an artist, or someone who's working behind the scenes. As I mentioned up top, Terry McBride is today's guest. Y'all are really in store for a good one. Terry's just a natural conversationalist and storyteller, probably why he became such a great songwriter. If you're unfamiliar with Terry McBride, here's a quick little refresher. Terry was the lead vocalist and chief songwriter of the early 90s country band McBride The Ride. They released a handful of albums, with 1992's Sacred Ground being their most successful. Not only did it boast 3 top 5 hits with the song Sacred Ground, Going Out of My Mind, and Just One Night, it was like top to bottom just a really great album that banked on the trio's soaring harmonies, these infectious hooks that revolved around great storytelling, and then this blend of this Texan twang and a touch of this Southwestern flair. Just a really underrated album of the era, and I encourage you to go listen to it top to bottom. Terry had always been a songwriter, but after McBride The Ride disbanded, he began writing more and naturally, obviously, started getting more massive cuts. Now, I won't list all of them here because we'll be here all night, but I'm talking Alan Jackson, George Strait, Reba McEntire, David Ball, Garth Brooks, George Dukas, John Anderson, Ricky Van Shelton, Wade Hayes, Kenny Rogers. Yeah, kind of a who's who there, right? And that's just artists that are connected to that 90s Neon Eon era. One artist, though, just stands out a little bit higher than the rest, and that is Brooks and Dunn. There's just this undeniable chemistry as co-writers between Terry and Ronnie Dunn. There's a handful of kicks Brooks co-writes in there as well. I won't ruin all the stories, but in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were just on the same wavelength and wrote a lot of incredible songs for the Brooks and Dunn catalog. I'm talking about songs like He's Got You, I Can't Get Over You, That's What She Gets for Loving Me, Play Something Country, Cowgirls Don't Cry, and while they weren't written with Ronnie or Kicks, I Am That Man, which is just one of my all-time favorites, and maybe their biggest one of all, If You See Him, If You See Her, the collaboration between Brooks and Dunn and Reba McEntire. So yeah, just some amazing material. We'll get into all of that here in 1 second with Terry, but let's just go over a couple of housekeeping notes. Please hit that subscribe button wherever you are listening. If you're on iTunes, it helps out immensely if you go ahead and give the Neon Eon a 5-star review. As I mentioned up top, the Neon Eon is brand new and, you know, it's really grassroots by nature. So go tell your friends, your family, your coworkers, and really just anyone who you think loves 90s country to check out the Neon Eon. Tell them to go subscribe and everything. Go give the podcast a like and a follow on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We're at the Neon Eon. If you're wanting even more Neon Eon content, check out the Patreon. For just a few bucks each month, you can get bonus material, Neon Eon merch, and so on. And speaking of merch, we're definitely getting the ball rolling on all of that. I'll have a merch store up and running by the end of the month. Right now, I actually do have a super limited supply of Neon Eon magnets that are in the New Slang store right now. If you're unfamiliar with New Slang, that is my other podcast about Americana music. You can, of course, subscribe and listen to that as well. Links to everything I just mentioned, those will all be in the show notes for easy access. I think that's about it. All right, let's do it. Here is Terry McBride.
After those shows, we played late, but then everybody would come back to a house somewhere, ours or somebody's in the band, and smoke pot or whatever we were doing, and it was just such a fun time. Sleeping till the crack of noon, that was like so fantastic, and I can't even imagine that now, but it was a whole different life, but it sure was fun.
Yeah, like as you mentioned just a second ago, you said how you've had like half your life in Texas and half your life in Tennessee. And I think that especially for this era of the late 80s, 90s country, one of the things that really sticks out is how distinct all these different bands sound. Every band kind of had their own voice and their own style and sound. And a lot of that I think comes from you guys all kind of having that life a little bit before going to Nashville. You mentioned how your dad was in a band and you played with him, and you played with Delbert McClinton, and I feel like you became you understood who you wanted to be before moving to Nashville, and
most definitely
getting those your legs underneath you, if you will.
Most definitely. That and it just completely cut my teeth on music. Went on to sort of influence me, to say the least, starting early on. My dad, just music constantly in my home. I was really fortunate as far as that goes, so that's where it all began for me. And I can trace everything I've done really even since then. A part of that is all from that experience and education I got, growing up in Texas and playing in bands. And I started early, my dad would take me on the road in the summers when I was about 13. He turned me on to playing bass, and that was just kind of all. That was it. He always needed a bass player. He's like, I'm the guitar player. He let me know that early on. I was playing guitar. I thought I was going to be the guitar player, My dad's like, man, he was already kind of grooming me here. That's cool. He gave me a guitar when I was 9. I thought I was probably surely going to be in the Beatles or something, And then he said, you going to play with me when you get older? You grow up? Is that what you want to do? I said, of course, And he's like, I need a bass player. I'm always needing a good bass player. So I went, okay, I'll be a bass player, And it was so easy, 4 strings from 6. I went, geez, this is nothing to this. I loved it, Picked it up real quick, and that's kind of what I was. Even into McBride The Ride, that's what I was. I was the lead singer playing bass because that's what I grew up doing,
Yeah, no, I think that's actually really kind of an interesting, cool thing, because you guys, especially with the McBride and the Ride, the 3-piece, it's almost like you didn't have to have an extra member. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
because of
you're right, exactly. It was lean and mean, but that was kind of the point. Harmonies on every song, 3-part, and we toured like that all in the beginning. We were having hits. And we were still just a 4-piece. We had steel guitar, a great steel guitar player that's we still are talked to, and he's actually going to do some dates with us. But a utility guy, lap, steel, whatever we needed. But we were having hits, and we were no bigger than a 4-piece band ever, And then arrangements got a little bit bigger, a little more lush, and we added keyboards later. But we're thinking of going back out and booking. We're going to do some dates with McBride The Ride, and that's the way we're going to do it. Just kind of like we did if you went to a concert in 1992. You're probably going to see about the same set and exactly the same members in the band, which is going to make it fun for us. Hopefully, fun for the audience. But we're looking forward to that. It's going to take us back. It's just sort of a side project for me. I'm focused on my solo career, or so-called career, whatever it is I'm doing. But it's great that those guys want to do that. You know, I didn't have to twist anybody's arm or talk anybody into it. I think that's always the best way to do something. If you're going to, you know, do some sort of reunion, it's good if everybody is on board and wants to do it. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got together about a year and a half ago before COVID, and we were going to really do a rollout, go to the CMA Fest, and got together and rehearsed. It was so much fun. Those harmonies were so good. We got excited about it, you know, and then we just put it on hold for over a year now, a year and a half almost. You know, it's just we've been waiting to see what's going to happen next, but something to look forward to.
Yeah, like that's what I find really interesting about like you guys coming back together like this is like as you mentioned, you didn't have to like twist any arms. Like it's all like the same principal members, which is like all
even
too
the
often.
even the steel player, our original guy Gary Morris, who plays with Brooks and Dunn, but he played with us for almost 4 years, and we'll even have him, which will make it really, really special.
Yeah, like a lot of times, you know, whenever you hear like about an artist coming back or like a band getting back together, you know, oh, it's not like the same as like it was in the original version of that band, but like, you know, whenever it is, it's just as you kind of said, like you guys got together and like those harmonies were just still like the puzzle pieces fit together, I guess, huh?
Yeah, it did. That was always weird for me when I would see an act touring and you were really a fan of them, but the main guy that was singing was no longer in the band. I thought, wow, that's odd. You know, that would be strange. But the thing about the band McBride The Ride, Ray Herndon, who I met early on, like 89, I met him in Austin. He was touring and playing with Lyle Lovett. And he had been doing that. He still does. He still plays with Lyle. He's been doing that since 1983. And a great musician. Ray's a fantastic guitar player. He's that big baritone singer, which makes our 3-part harmony really special and unique, sort of like a family blend, because we got together. We thought we were badass musicians. People were going to love us because I'd come from Delbert McClinton. Billy Thomas, our drummer, was with the hot band, Emmylou Harris at the time, and Ray was with Lyle Lovett. So, but we realized nobody cared about that. But when we started singing, those harmonies came together. We really got their attention with that. That was sort of our calling card. And with that being said, Billy Thomas is the high harmony guy, which just makes it all kind of come together. It's just I'm right in the middle. I'm a tenor, but Billy's a high harmony, Ray's a baritone. And Billy's been with Vince Gill and plays in the Time Jumpers, and phenomenal drummer, amazing musician. I'm the one that's going to have to really practice. I mean, those guys are still playing. I've been putting my bass on and learning all those bass licks from back in the day. But it's been fun. It's really going to be good. And just like I said, it's sort of a side project that, you know, we're not going to commit the whole year to doing it, and that's going to make it fun too. We're not under any pressure to have a bunch of dates and routing dates and all that kind of stuff. We'll probably do 3-4 days at a time and take a break, and then I'll be doing my solo shows, which we are booking quite a few of those already, so that's encouraging. And we do have, you know, 2 separate runs for McBride The Ride, so that's going to be cool. It's going to be a good year. We can eventually get back out there and pull it off. It'll really be fun, but it's something, like I said, to look forward to in the future.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So take me back to like, I guess, what is it, like 1989? You get up to Nashville and like the band is forming at that point. As we kind of mentioned, you know, there was a lot more. It wasn't just like the quote unquote like generic Southern voice of a band or an artist. There was all these different kinds of sounds, and so you were able to pull from, you know, some of the bands you had played from down here in Texas. What was it like, I guess, knowing that, you know, you're trying to like carve out this spot of like the 3-part harmonies, a little bit of the balladry, but like also I feel like there's a very distinct Texas kind of vibe with I guess like whenever all this was being put together at the very beginning, I guess like what I'm asking is how much did you know that this is what you wanted the band to sound like?
Well, I didn't really have a clue in the beginning, honestly, Thomas, because I was, making trips to Nashville, getting rejected and it was so intimidating coming up from Texas and trying to figure out who to meet, who to see. I didn't really have a ton of connections at all. I was just kind of going door to door in the beginning, and that was getting me nowhere. I kept getting that same, we don't take unsolicited material. I wasn't even sure what the hell that even meant in the beginning. It's like, what? But the receptionist was so intimidating and so mean. It was discouraging. You know, I went, I might as well try to get to Mars. It couldn't be any further away than what I'm trying to do right now. You know, it just seemed almost impossible. Then, as luck would have it, you know, I went back to Texas, continued to write on my own, which is kind of what you do in the beginning. No one wants to write with you when you haven't done a damn thing. You know, I'm just in my bedroom, you know, knocking out these sad little home demos. I'm playing guitar and bass, creating them all myself, trying to program some stupid drum machine that I don't even want to use. You know, it was just a lot, but I kept at it. Then I was fortunate where I got a chance to play in a couple really cool bands, Leroy Parnell early on, Rosie Flores, Jimmie Dale Gilmore, just Johnny Duncan, a Nashville act that was living in Dublin, Texas. And then eventually a great band called the C Notes that Reese Winan, who was the piano player for Delbert McClinton at the time, who went on to play with Stevie Ray Vaughan, and now Joe Bonamassa, you know, world-class musician. He was playing in the studio in my dad's recording studio in Lampasas. I was slowly meeting these people, slowly getting some connections in the Texas music scene, which is where it all started. Then I got taken in by these husband-wife, Bill Carter, Ruth Ellsworth. Bill was putting a band together to go tour with Stevie Ray Vaughan. I just left Delbert to focus on my songwriting, I thought, you know, auditioned for Bill Carter's band, and off we went, opening for Stevie Ray Vaughan all across the country. It was fantastic. And while we were on tour, I played my little home demos, a couple of little country songs that I liked. And fortunately, Bill and Ruth, they really liked it. We started writing, and that's the music that led to McBride The Ride. That's almost all that first album or songs that I wrote with Bill and Ruth, one with Rosie Flores, but they came right from Austin. We started cutting them there in Austin using really cool friends, wonderful musicians, Stephen Bruton on guitar, and just a host of fantastic musicians that we loved and played with a lot there in Austin. And because of that, Thomas, that made my sound different than everything else that was kind of being pitched or recorded in Nashville. That's what opened the door for me when Tony Brown, the producer and the head of MCA Records, heard my demos. The first thing he said was, man, this is so cool and so different. And he just loved it. You know, for whatever reason, I hit him at the right time, the right day. We saw a lot of people on that particular trip. I came up with Bill and Ruth from Austin. And because we were a little unique, it did have that Texas vibe. That's what really opened the door for me. I mean, if I had been just another Nashville guy or whatever at the time, who knows what might have happened. But the fact that I wasn't, and the fact that it was a little different, that's what led to the whole McBride The Ride. So through that, Tony signed me, and really signed me as a solo artist. There was no band in the beginning. And then Tony flew down to San Antonio for New Year's Eve, a George Strait New Year's Eve party, you know, at the arena. And Tony Brown was producing George Strait, and invited me and my wife. And then he took me to the dressing room and said, here's the deal, man. Also Patty Loveless, Vince Gill, they were on that same New Year's Eve. It was fantastic. But he said, man, you know, you're a band guy, and one of the hardest things for an artist is getting a band, a good band. You know, he goes, we've got the Desert Rose Band is on MCA, but they're done. They're leaving. It's over, and we need a band. What would you think about that? You know, I was like, dang, I don't know if I want to be in a band, but I'm tired of starving in Austin too, you know. So, and Tony Brown was the guy. He was producing that first Steve Earle records, Patty Loveless, you know, George Strait, everything that I loved, La Lovett's records. He was the guy. Of all the people I met in Nashville, and I was fortunate to meet some other great producers and label heads, but Tony's the one that really bit on what I was doing. So it just couldn't have worked any better. So I said, yeah, sure, I'll try it. And then Tony had the idea. He knew Ray through La Lovett, of course. He knew Billy through Emmylou Harris, and Billy was singing on some of those early Vince Gill records, harmony parts. So he's the guy that had the idea of the band. I had nothing to do with that. And he brought those guys around, and along with Steve Fischel, a great steel guitar player, producer that was playing with Amy Lou at the time. And that became the band. I mean, we just set up shop and started rehearsing. I showed the guys, we rehearsed in Steve Fischel's basement first, and then moved into a sound stage that MCA put together. And then they just started bringing all these people through, managers, agents, lawyers, Indian chiefs, whatever. They just had a cattle call of people. We'd play our same little 3 or 4 songs for these people, whoever came through. And he was just getting people excited and interested. Here's a new act we've got. What do you think? And so that's when the songs really came together. And fortunately for me, these little country songs and a couple of sort of blues influenced tunes, they had moments of spotlighting harmony, which in a band you took advantage of every strength you had back in the day. And, we had this harmony blend. So we just slowly started incorporating that into our sound, because really we didn't know what we were doing. We were just trying to, on the verge of possibly having this record deal and a chance to take our music to a whole other level if it all came together. But it was still sort of a trial period for us to make sure everybody else thought we were cool or whatever. We just worked hard, and fortunately the band was really good. And then we did get the deal, and then we were off and running.
Yeah. Like what I find so remarkable about, just the music industry in general is how, it's the hard work, it's the little bit of talent, the practice, the connections, all of that. And then I think most people also add up just the timing being right, and just taking a little bit of for lack of a better term, luck sometimes. It's just all those things have to be the right conditions for so many artists.
You bet. It has to line up. I mean, 6 months later, Tony may have already had a guy like me at the label. It just, labels look at that sort of things well, we like Terry, but we just signed this kid's a lot like Terry. I mean, there's 1,000 scenarios that could happen to not make it all come together like it did for me. I mean, I've seen Tony Brown do that with other acts, people pitching constantly songs and acts, and he would pass, they already have a Patti Loveless or whatever, I mean, it's tough when you get in there. And fortunately, my songwriting had risen, had been elevated to a level that it wasn't prior to me making all those trips to Nashville. I had good ideas, good songs. Songwriters in the beginning, you're into what you're doing, you're excited, you finally got a good song or two you feel, but another 100 songs or a couple hundred songs later, you realize those songs really didn't hold up. They weren't as good. You learned a lot more about songwriting and arrangements, or hopefully, I mean, that's what keeps you advancing and moving forward as an artist and a writer. You continue to try and be creative and, bring your level of artistry up to where it's going to be interesting for somebody else other than just you. Mm-hmm. It's gotta connect somehow. It's gotta be, something somebody wants to connect to. And in the beginning, I remember at the label, even Can I Count on You was a song we had, very simple country song. It was so simple that when they did all this researching and testing, it really came in at the bottom. They're like, this song is just too simple, too country. And it eventually became our very first hit single. I mean, I think what testing and researching did back then is they underestimated the actual audience and the connection that an audience has with a certain song and a lyric. And that song was like a little love song, but it was a good song. And then and it did connect, and it saved our little career over there. The first couple singles that they thought were hits, they just didn't connect for whatever reason. But that one, thanks to Tony Brown, he was just adamant about that song being a single, and it connected. So I learned a lot of lessons early on, just sort of trust yourself. I can only do what I can do as a writer and an artist, but I like that responsibility, and I take it on. I'm very serious about it. Even all these years later, here I am, still connecting with people, still writing, still fortunate to be able to be doing all of that, and still enjoying it, which is really the only reason I'm still in it, I think, at this point. I just still enjoy it. I like getting up and taking on those. Tomorrow I'm writing with a young artist, like a 21-year-old guy that I really like. He's signed to a major label, and they've recorded 2 or 3 of my things already, and it's fun. And Texas guy, and we connected personally and also musically, and that's fun. It's good stuff I look forward to, and everybody needs that and wants that, And I'm still fortunate to be in the middle of all that kind of good stuff, including my solo stuff, which is something I didn't focus on for about 20 years. I was writing for other artists and having success, and so thankful that I didn't really miss the spotlight once it went away. I came to town as a songwriter. That's what I had hoped I could possibly do moving forward, making a living at it. I had no idea if I could ever do it or not, but it's really has been my job for a lot of years now, and it's still something I work at, and still something that I enjoy doing.
Yeah, like I think there's something to, going up to Nashville and seeing like what where you measure up as far as the songwriting goes, and
yeah.
I think that can obviously be a very humbling thing, but at the end of the day, like it goes back to kind of like, you're either gonna raise your game up or go home.
Yeah.
And
man, it's brutal. Yeah. It's a town that's built on great songs, not good average songs. It's a town that's built on classic, well-crafted, wonderful songs that I grew up on, so yeah, intimidating to say the least. And you think about this, Thomas, I grew up in Lampasas, which is just down the road from Austin. So when I was in high school, talking mid to late 70s, the progressive country music scene, the outlaw movement was just on fire,
Right.
We loved Jerry Jeff. Oh my God, that Viva Terlingua record when it came out, holy cow. We played almost every song off of that album because they were hits in Texas, You could not, London Homesick Blues or whatever off of that record. I mean, it was so fantastic. And also, I started seeing this guy when I was like a freshman. We started learning these songs. I kept seeing this Guy Clark. I'd see his name on the back of the album. It's like, who is this guy, Guy Clark? But I sure like his songs, He's like, and the stuff he was doing too. I loved it. Rita Ballou and cool things. But Doug Somm, Rusty Weir, Gary P., it just was endless. And it was just down the road in Austin. It's like, of course, Willie was leading the charge of all of it, which Willie was one of my biggest influences, and I just looked up to everything he did musically. I changed my life early on with an album called Phases and Stages. It really hit me, and I was a young guy, but still, I loved those sad songs, and couldn't wait to get my heart broken. Grew up. That was a concept album, a divorce album. Right. I couldn't wait to grow up and get divorced. I wanted to be just like Willie. I was like 13, 14, it's like, oh my God, I loved it so much. So with that being said, move forward to, like you're saying, 1989, I get signed to MCA, and a young girl there, Renee Bell, said, I'm going to start helping you. I'm going to start booking your calendar. We're going to get you to writing with all these people. And my very first co-write coming up from Austin was with Guy Clark. That's my first Nashville co-write.
Oh, wow.
Oh, exactly. I couldn't sleep. I was so stressed out. Legendary songwriter, kind of guy that doesn't even need another guy in the room to write a song, And wow, it was a lot. And so, I had 4 or 5 ideas. One idea I really kind of liked, and, went to his office right on Music Row. He was on the 3rd floor. He had a little oval window he had opened. He was smoking cigarettes in there, and he's kind of a hulk of a guy. I went, oh my God, it was just like all I could do to, hey, Guy, and played him my ideas. He really liked the first idea. Then we kind of visited for a bit, a couple of Texas guys. He really made me feel fairly comfortable, and then the fact that he liked the song. At the end of the day, man, he's like, I want to take this home and I want to work on this song a little bit more. I was like, man, I appreciate it. And it was just almost felt like I belonged, and he had no idea, but he gave me so much confidence that day. It could have gone, who knows what direction it could have gone, but And then he also said about halfway into the meeting and talking, he's like, "Man, you want to get high?" And I said, "Yes, sir." So now I'm high with Guy. It's like, oh my God, I'm paranoid. But really, at the end of the day, I left there going, shit, if I can survive that, maybe I can do this, And then later, he would invite me to his house. We no longer went to the office. He made me feel, it was just great. I just loved hanging out with him so much. I didn't even give a shit if we wrote a song or not. I just admired him so much. I could never really just feel that I belonged. I had him way up on a pedestal, I felt I was so far beneath his talent, and he was so brilliant. It was tough. It was tough for me. I wish I'd written a classic Guy Clark song that was, on every jukebox or album, but it didn't happen that way. We wrote several songs, and I would bring other young artists over to meet him because I felt they needed to meet someone like Guy Clark. If you're going to get in this business, you might as well throw you into the fire just like I had to do it, and see if you could make it or not, But there again, great experiences, great opportunities by just finding my way and up here in Nashville for sure.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's shocking looking back, but what a great memory. Then Thomas, he had a cool room downstairs in this sort of condo he was living in, and it was his workshop. He was in there building these beautiful handcrafted guitars. He had a fan as sort of a vent for the sawdust, I'm sure, and dust and everything else. But he had all kinds of cool woodworking tools on the wall. Then one wall was solid cassettes, just nothing but cassettes, demos, songs he'd written, just hundreds of them, all stacked up together, and little cassette holders, back in the day. And it was great. He had a big old table. We'd just sit down in there and visit. And then we'd go get Mexican food for lunch, take a break, come back. And it was great. Like I said, I didn't care if we wrote. I just loved hanging out with him so much, and so glad I got to. And other guys like that. I was such a fan of songwriters, especially artists also, but the guys that were writing these songs, it was just, it was mind blowing that here they were. You got to Nashville, all of a sudden you could actually run into them, meet them. Harlan Howard, see him at lunch, it was like, wow, it's unbelievable. These guys they exist. Dean Dillon, got to go to his house and got to know Dean Dillon. It's like, wow, it was just the best of times, and I cherished every minute of it, an opportunity that I got. I looked up to those guys so much. It took me a while to just kind of relax and try to get comfortable because I was a fan. It's wow, hanging out in a small room with someone you sort of idolize like that. But it was great. It was a great time, and it still is. I still get to do some of that, and artists that I love and respect, and then having those kind of people record your songs, it is mind blowing. I came to Nashville. We were hoping to get a George Strait cut, and the second cut I got as a songwriter outside of McBride The Ride was George Strait, and it was mind blowing. I couldn't believe it at first. It was just like somewhere George had been sitting learning a song I'd written. It was just like I could picture it, but I couldn't grasp it all totally until I heard him singing the song, and it was like, that's a good day. That's a good day as a songwriter.
Yeah, like that's I want to go back to, there's so many things I want to touch on with that you mentioned that.
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure where I'm taking us either, but
I think that one of my big things is, as you mentioned, you grew up outside of Austin, and in your years of in your high school years, there's right down the road is all this amazing music happening.
Yeah.
I think that's so key to a lot of artists is if you realize that there's obviously your dad was a musician, but that's also
right.
like your dad, just like sometimes you don't even realize how important that is, right? Because it's so close. But like having someone from around the same place doing incredible things, I think that allows some. It gives you a little bit of allowance to dream and to not necessarily think like, because as you said, you didn't necessarily just go straight to Nashville at 18. You had the ability to try and get into a music scene and realize oh yeah, I can do it down the street too. So
Yeah, man. It became real, Thomas, where, if you're sitting and listening to a Tony Bennett record or whoever you love, whoever you like, whatever it's rock, pop, whatever, chances are, yeah, you might can go to a concert eventually and see them. But when I was in high school, man, I could get in my little Chevelle, drive down to Austin. I could be at the Rome Inn in an hour, and there would be Doug Somm with a 10-piece band, like in a small club, and that was happening everywhere down there. Armadillo World headquarters was still alive and happening. And my high school buddies, we could go see Charlie Daniels, Jerry Jeff Walker, Willie Nelson, whoever was on the bill, and then whoever artist just happened to show up that was living in Austin. Rusty Weir, I loved him. His music, I just loved his voice. Ray Wiley, it was real. All of a sudden it became real, other than just staring at something on an album cover. These guys are real, and they're living just down the road from where I'm growing up. So it was just a fantastic time. It was some of my favorite music. Now, we were doing, Ray Price, Farron Young, Johnny Bush, tons of that, Gary Stewart, things like that. Whatever you could two-step to in Texas, that's the kind of band I was in high school. I was a freshman. The guys were like juniors, seniors, and freshmen in college, that kind of age. They were all older than me, but it was a very popular band. Hundreds of kids would come each weekend. We would only play weekends, maybe a Friday or a Saturday night. Occasionally go down to A&M, play a frat party or something like that, which the lead singer was going to school down there. So, but basically just tons of country stuff and whatever was on the radio, tons of Merle Haggard and George Jones and stuff like that too, but it was fantastic. And then, like you said, my dad was a very accomplished musician, great guitar player, built a studio in Lampasas of all places. Cool studio. We had world-class musicians coming in from Austin to play. Reese Winan, I'd mentioned. Ernie Durawa, who was a friend of my dad's, who was playing drums for the Texas Tornadoes, Doug Somm, and we'd record violins, strings. My dad would write charts, arrangements. He was brilliant like that. And I grew up with that. Musicians coming and going constantly. My dad had an old woolen sack reel-to-reel. He'd be recording out in his office. He'd have the guys over in a living room recording. It was just, he had the band panel truck with the matching trailer, Dale McBride on the side of it. And when I was really young, Thomas, my dad would come off of these runs. He'd go out the West Coast maybe for a month or 2 or 3. We wouldn't see him. Once you had the West Coast and work your way back, we might not see him for a couple months, but he'd come back. He had that trailer, and man, I would play in that trailer. I can't tell you how many hours I spent in there. It had this smell that I loved. I thought, you got all these amps, gear, equipment, black lights. My dad even had a black light box. It was crazy, for a show that he was doing. Then he had a clothes rod at the back, and they hang all their suits and tuxedos and stuff up. And I'd get in there, and man, it was like the smell. And then I thought, it was like, this is what music smells like. And then I realized later that this is what cigarette smoke smells like. That's really all it was. It was everything soaked in sweat or cigarettes. It was so strong, but I loved it. I'm talking 5, 6 years old. My job was getting my dad's guitar out, and I would polish it for him. That was early on. I couldn't play guitar yet. My hands were... This was like a big Epiphone Casino, which I own now, a 1967 Epiphone that my dad bought new. But my dad passed away in 92, so I inherited all of his cool guitars and amps and stuff. I have all of it still and use it quite a bit. But that's what I did. My job was to polish the guitar and, pretend like I could play. And then eventually when I was 9, I did get a guitar, and I was off and running. I wanted to be just like my dad. And there was no stopping me, even though my dad really did try. He just knew it was going to be tough business. And he tried to talk me into maybe going to college or something. But hell, I barely got out of high school. There was no college for me. I went straight out of high school, auditioned for my dad's band, which tells you a little bit about my dad. I had to audition with two other older guys, and then he let the band decide who got the job. He had no part of it. I was on my own, and I knew the material better than those guys did. And so right out of high school, my dad was having some success on the charts, and he had about a dozen little Billboard charted singles, one that went to 15. And we had a tour bus, and William Morris was booking him, and we were doing cool dates. Ronnie Millsap tours, Roy Clark, Barbara Mandrell, just fantastic stuff right out of high school. That's what I was doing. So driving the bus and playing bass, and it was just like living my dream, right out of high school.
I don't know, like if probably at that time you just thought like, oh, it doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah. making no money really. I mean, it was small amounts, and my dad withheld everything too, like a business. We'd get a check, but by the time you get your money, he'd already withheld taxes. Like, oh no, I'm not making much money here. Can we not pay taxes right now? It's like he was very business-like with that sort of thing. He tried to pound that into me. You got to treat this like a business, and I never really got that early on. I certainly got it later, but I wasn't concerned about that. I was just thrilled to be on the road. Driving that bus, it was fantastic. It was a 1964 Trailways that my dad bought at a bus auction from the Trailways company in San Antonio. They would turn over their fleet every 10 years or so, and they'd rebuild that big old Detroit motor, and they just sell you the bus with all the seats in it, and then you do whatever you want with it. Of course, they gutted it and made a lounge and really turned it into a cool little bus. I wish I had it now, but it was like a 35-footer, the single axle on the back, but it was a Trailways Greyhound. It was their bus they used for commercial, bus company all over the country. But a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun, man. And then then my dad went through this period of he got into gospel music and became born again, and then honky tonks and all that sort of lifestyle went out the window. He just would not do it anymore. And so I was on my own after that. That's how I ended up in Lubbock. I got married, and the next week I, packed up a U-Haul, which was probably just a trailer. I had nothing. So pulled that out to Lubbock and set up shop, went to work with an 8-piece band out there that was just fantastic, and horns, and it was great. Just doing cover music of all kinds of genres. It was just from swing to pop to lots of country, and fantastic musicians. And then I just slowly kind of went along as the singing bass player, is what I did in Texas with all these other artists, until just really focusing on writing. I knew if I was going to make it out other than just being a bass player, I had to create some music, and that was really my goal and my passion. That's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to write and create music and of my own. And it was a slow process, but eventually one dot connected to the other, and it got me to here I am all these years later still talking about it with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like I think like all those years down in Texas, obviously we've mentioned how you kind of you cut your teeth, and I guess like you get accustomed to being out on the road, and that's so important. But then you also realize, I want to write songs, and I want to do something with my name on it. I want to have some kind of, I want something a little bit better, a little bit different. Like I feel like that's one of those things where you kind of have to just jump. And as you said, you get up to Nashville, and you're making these trips to Nashville, and you finally get the record deal, and you get what I would consider probably like that 92 record, Sacred Ground, is like kind of where everything starts falling into place, and just an incredible, well-rounded record.
Oh, thanks.
What is like? Yeah, well, whenever you guys were cutting that record, did you guys know like, oh, we've hit the ground running, we know what this is, and or was it a little bit more of a surprise as you guys had more critical and mass success?
Well, we were slowly coming together as a band. I mean, we're just kind of all introduced to each other. It wasn't like we grew up together playing. It was a totally different type of situation we were all kind of thrown into with an opportunity to do something. But obviously we made the most of it. That first record, we got a couple little hits off of that, Can I Count on You, Same Old Star. And then the next record was 92, like you said, the Sacred Ground. We knew that song was a hit because we had been on the road playing it. And, there's just nothing better than playing a song no one's ever heard and then getting a reaction that you just weren't even expecting. That little song just connected with so many people right off the bat. We knew we had a shot with that. And then we followed it up with, a couple more hits, 2 or 3, 4 off of that album. They were all just all top 5, number 1 songs. And we were hitting our stride with that particular record. We had some good material on there, and that got us, that led to about 200 dates a year on the road. It was just the 90s. If you were having success, you were just literally just burning it up out there. And we were fortunate to be one of those acts that was, on the radio, and videos were very popular. It was just so wonderful. Country music was kind of slow to come around from MTV. By the time the early 90s rolled around, that was a very popular form of, promotion, and everybody was jumping on it, and several outlets to play it, and big countdown shows. I'll never forget, we had a song early on, Can I Count on You? Really, the video became more popular than the single, and that drove the request from the video. The demand from it made radio have to play it. Really, it was it was the opposite effect. The video became the hit first, and then radio followed, where it's usually the other way around. But that was a powerful thing. It showed the power of those videos back in the day. But it was wonderful. I mean, it was great. We practiced and played so much. I mean, 200 dates later, you get to be pretty tight as a band, So we didn't have to think about much other than getting on stage. It was exhausting. It was, that type of touring, it was a lot back in the day, and promoting constantly, always. Still, we had one of those brick cell phones you see in the movies now, like from the 80s, late 80s, that big brick with the antenna sticking off the end of it. We had one of those, but the only problem with one of those, towers hadn't been created and placed all over the country. So you could only get service in certain areas, not like today where you just drive around and use your phone, You had to have a tower nearby. So we were still getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning to pull in a truck stop to use the payphone. If we were going to call radio, had to have a landline. You couldn't trust that damn cell phone. But looking back, it's pretty funny looking back now, just the thought of that. My daughters, I sound like my parents. I start telling them about the good old days. They have no idea what wasn't all invented back in that time. But still, think about it. Back then, door to door was the best you could do. Radio was the main way to get your music out, of course. But then it was just going town to town playing in front of an audience. Of course, now releasing this new music, holy cow, people will tell you immediately what they think and whether they have the record, what's their favorite. I mean, I love it because of that. And of course, that's what we're all using it for, is to connect with our fans, especially during this last year. Think about it. Thomas, if I hadn't had this new music out, it would have been a very down, bleak kind of last 10, 11 months for me. I had something to sort of get up and work for and talk about and, share mainly, which is what socials are all about, and so it's been, as bad as things have been and as strange as they've been, it's was a big plus for me having this music and being a great way to stay in touch with these fans who have slowly come around to realizing who I am and what I'm doing, because 20 years absence, a lot of people only know me from McBride The Ride. Some people know me as the songwriter. And now with my solo stuff, I'm really having to, I'm like a 62-year-old baby act, I'm like trying to get my audience together, trying to find my audience. But we came with a little single this year, and that's been another big plus, man. Something I've never done. I have a single in Texas on the Red Dirt charts, and we're closing in on top 5 this week, which is it's thrilling, man. It's exciting, and knowing that my music is kind of connecting, and that's the thing I love about Texas. You know, I can kind of be who I am, and don't have to, try to make my music be something it's not. It just kind of is accepted, and that's really what you hope. Here's who I am. This is what I like. Do you like it too? And when people do, it's just a great feeling for me, especially still in it after all this time. I went out a year and a half ago, played about 50 dates, just me and my guitar, 90-minute show, and the crowds are what really allowed me and gave me the confidence to keep doing it. If it hadn't gone well, or if I couldn't sing, and there were no crowds, we wouldn't be having this discussion today, probably. But because I had some places that were successful and some nights that were really good, it's been encouraging. And so we're just moving forward. We're going to see what happens next. But focusing a little more in Texas it's just exciting for me. I mean, like you said, we're talking about, that's where it all sort of started for me musically. And it's kind of come full circle now. That's where I'm back. I'm back to those crowds. It's where a lot of my interest as far as venues and things like that, starting to book a few more of those already. And that's encouraging too. So it's all good, man. I've really enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned how, right around solid ground, going back to that part right there, the 200 tour dates. And
yeah.
What I find really, really interesting that a lot of people have talked about when it comes to playing and getting that record deal, recording records, playing all those dates, like your time gets divvied up, right? And like you lose that time where you used to be able to kind of just write. As you mentioned, you were writing a lot of songs back when were you able to write on the road, or did you have to like just be more aware of like how you divvied up your time?
Oh, well, much more aware, because when you're in that artist phase and you're having success, the playing on stage is just a small part of it. Usually that morning when we got to the hotel or wherever we were staying that day, we'd just driven in from somewhere else. We would maybe rest, but usually we were headed to a station. Back then, that was such a big thing where you would go on air. Rarely even exists anymore today. Airtime is so precious. You don't hear somebody coming in, stumbling into the studio, taking over the airwaves, But back then, it was a huge deal. If they're pumping your song out there over the airwaves and playing your single 4 or 5 times a day or whatever they're doing, and you roll into town, you've got people that want to see you. It's a fantastic thing. Of course, you're exhausted. You're tired. Me as the lead singer, it was just a constant struggle to get rest. Because then after the show, meet and greets, local DJs, whatever, they want to talk to you. Might want to take you to a bar that night because they want the party to continue. I wasn't drinking back then. I don't now, but so much talking. Gosh, by the next day, sometimes my voice would just be barely hanging in there. And of course, then I've got to sing that night, and I've got to start the whole thing over again the next day, So that was the biggest struggle for me, just constantly promoting, singing, talking, and enjoying everything that's going on, laughing with the guys on the bus. It's just, it was a lot of fun, but a lot of work went into it. And back in those days, I just wasn't writing much on the road. Now, when I came home, if I had 2 or 3 days off, usually I had 2 or 3 days of writing. There just was no downtime really much back in those days because time was precious. And when you got back to Nashville, chances are I had, something scheduled with someone wonderful to try and write with. And which is funny because all during that McBride The Ride day, like you were saying, after Sacred Ground, things really took off. But then as the band went into our next album, still had a couple more hits. Then everything just came unraveled. The label wanted to put even more focus on me. The guys were kind of getting pushed out. I was making most of the money. I was writing all those songs. It was just a lot of things started to divide and split the band up, which was just sad in a lot of ways because we were close, and business got in the way of it. And fortunately, we remained close all these years, which is why we're, enjoying getting back together. Even through all we went through, we still like each other, as strange as that might be for some people. We really enjoy being around each other, love playing music together. So that's great that we've been able to, work that out between ourselves. But at the time, it never really got ugly. It just got kind of heartbreaking. It was, we had a good thing going and it ended. And then when it did end, I didn't really want to do it anymore either. They left me hanging with Terry McBride The Ride, and went on, did one more record. It wasn't very successful. And then I just threw in the towel. I went, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not the original guys. I'm not enjoying it. I still had dates on the books. And then I just sort of took a break. And fortunately for me, Thomas, during that period, I started getting some songs recorded. John Anderson, I mentioned the George Strait, and then Brooks and Dunn. They were like one of the first acts. I had this song I wrote for myself for potentially or possibly a solo album, but it didn't pan out. It didn't work out for me. And that song went on to be pitched to Ronnie Dunn. And when he heard it, he loved it, and they recorded it. It was a song called I Am That Man, and became a big old hit. And really what it did, I knew Kix and Ronnie. Kix had co-written Sacred Ground,
Right.
We'd been nominated for New Group of the Year, ACM and CMA, us, like Diamond Rio, Brooks and Dunn. So I knew those guys. I'd met them. I loved them. Ronnie, I loved Ronnie's voice. Neon Moon, when I heard that for the first time, I just slayed me. I went, damn, what a great song, what a great singer. So I already loved those guys even before I met them. And then they cut that song of mine, I Am That Man, in '96. That was on that My Maria album. It was the follow-up single, actually, to My Maria. But it kind of lived in the shadows of My Maria. That song was so massive, But what it did, it opened the door for me to eventually strike up a friendship with Ronnie. He invited me over to his home, and he said, man, I've got a tour bus. I'm getting off the band bus, and I'm going to have my own bus. Would you be interested in coming out on the road with me, and write a song? And I went, heck yeah, man, because my deal was done. I'd already left the label. McBride The Ride was over. I was solely focusing on, can I make it as a songwriter, And he opened the door, man, and the bus door, and we went out to California for about 15 days. We wrote 10 songs on that trip and a couple big old hits for those guys. And that started the beginning of a 13-year run that I just sort of lived on the road with those guys. And we probably wrote 98% of every song I had recorded by those guys. We probably wrote it on the bus, out on the road, either hotel or just rolling down the road. So for all those years I didn't write with my own band, that's all I did with Ronnie. And of course, it's just the two of us on the bus. Very comfortable, very wonderful lifestyle, very relaxed. And also when he would come off the stage after a show, he had all that energy, 15,000 people, a couple cocktails. What are you going to do with it? Well, if I had a good idea, we had an outlet for it, and he loved that. He loved it and relied on me to sort of provide that opportunity. It didn't happen all the time, but boy, it sure happened a lot. And I was there to, not really take advantage of it, but I was there. And because I didn't take advantage of it, I think that's why we had the most success. I never really pressured him ever. If we had a good idea, great. If we didn't, we'd do something else. We'd watch a good movie or maybe get some sleep that night or whatever. But we were pretty diligent, pretty disciplined for a time when a lot of fun was being had and a lot of cocktails and stuff. We managed to put time in and get those songs written, which looking back, it's a wonderful thing. I just talked to Ronnie yesterday. We were going over a couple things and some of those songs and reminiscing a little bit. And then moving forward, I have a song on his new album. He just finished a honky tonk record, and I've got a cool tune on there that he just cut. So we're going to continue to do some things together too, write a couple things, maybe have him involved in a record or two for my stuff down in Texas. Ronnie's a Texas boy. He was born in Coleman, Texas. He spent a lot of his time in Oklahoma and Tulsa, but he's a Texas boy at heart. And he likes following me and seeing what I'm doing. He's pretty interested in this Texas stuff I'm involved in. He loves it. So maybe get him a little more involved with what I'm doing down the road. That'd be a fun thing for sure.
No, absolutely. Yeah, like that. If you go, and I'm talking to like listeners now, if you go back to like from like basically like Borderline on,
yep,
a lot of those songs that you know and love, like they're co-writes between you and Ronnie.
Yeah.
I mean, like as you mentioned, like I Am That Man. Of course, like, you said like you wrote that yourself, but like He's Got
right.
You, and like you wrote or you co-wrote If You See Her, If You See Him, and like
Reba.
Yeah, like that's just I mean, talk about that song specifically. If You See Her, as far as like how did because that's not a co-write with Ronnie, but clearly like
not.
that was like a massive song, and like what's the story behind how that got put together, I guess?
Fortunately, it has a story, and not all of these songs. I know I get a lot of requests from different publications and stuff like, we want to do a feature on the story behind the song. It's like, oh my God, that song doesn't really even have a story, but this one does, as far as the way it just came together. There again, out on the road with Ronnie and Brooks and Dunn, and this particular year, I think that was about maybe 1999 or so. They were out on tour, a big co-headline tour with Reba McEntire, and the tour was massive, all the huge arenas, and it was just fantastic. And as we're pulling out of the venue that night, I was up front, like the captain's chair up front in the bus. Ronnie's sitting there too. We're talking. He's like, man, if we could find a duet for me and Reba, I think we'd take this tour on maybe another year, And so when he said that, I went, damn, a light bulb went off, I thought this could be an opportunity. So when I got back home, I had a writing session scheduled with Jennifer Kimball and Tommy Lee James, both who have had a lot of success over the years, and also both friends of mine at the time. We were writing quite often, and, we knew each other well. So I had reached out and told him, hey, I know we're writing next week. Here's the deal. The guys are looking for a duet. Let's just think about it, And so Jennifer Kimball, being the pro she is, she came prepared. She's like, I got an idea. I think picture Reba going into a bar, and she tells her girlfriends, if you see him, let him know I'm thinking about him, And we went, oh, that's so good. That's fantastic, So we talked a little bit more, and then we said, and what if Ronnie goes into a bar and he goes to his buddies, and if you see her, let her know I'm thinking about her. We went, oh man, it's almost too good. It's like we had the idea. Now we just need a whole lot of words in the middle to fill it up. If we don't screw it up, we might have a song here. So it just took off. It was so much fun. We had the principal players involved. To picture. There's Reba talking to her girls. Here's Ronnie telling his guys. We just imagine what they might say, and that's how the story was built. And then when we finished, it was so good. We just knew we had it. Then we had to cut a version of it, a demo, they call it, here in Nashville. We had to go in the studio, and we had to cut a demo to pitch to Ronnie and Reba. So I'd been singing on these Brooks and Dunn records. I've been doing some harmony stuff. I've got that, honky tonk sort of tenor thing like Ronnie does. And I kind of, make my voice sound like Ronnie because that's what you do on these records. It's kind of, meshing and blending my voice to fit. And we, on the bus, we knew we had a cool blend because when we write these songs, we cut these little work tapes on cassette or whatever back then. And we liked it. Ronnie's like, man, that sounds so good on this work tape. Come in, I want you to sing that on the record. That's how that kind of started, really. So, so I went in the studio and I did my best Ronnie Dunn. I sang it just like Ronnie might. And the cool thing about that song, it has a lot of ERs in it. If you see her, sounds like Ronnie. Ronnie sounds like that, Tell her I'm doing fine, oh, the falsetto, I went, that's perfect, classic Ronnie, So I did my best Ronnie. And then we had a young girl, Sonny Rusk, come in that was working and writing for Reba's company, Starstruck. And she did the Reba portion and just did a great job. The arrangement was just so good. So took it to Ronnie's house and probably on a cassette back then. And he put it in the cassette deck, and he just cranked it up on these massive speakers he had, and I could tell, man, he's digging it. He's into it. I could tell by his mannerism, and of course, here I am singing just like Ronnie Dunn, and when he finished the song, he turned to me and he's like, "Terry, I've never heard you sound better in your life," he said. And I went, "Well, thanks, Ronnie. I'm just doing my best Ronnie Dunn." But he loved the song. Sent it to Reba. She loved the song. Then they sat down. Brooks and Dunn was with Arista. Reba was with Universal, 2 different labels. And during the meeting, I don't know what happened, but they started making demands. One thing led to another, and it just went south. And the whole deal fell apart. It wasn't going to happen. And I was crushed, because I knew, God, this song is so perfect for these guys. We wrote it for them, and they couldn't figure out how to do it. Finally, I mean, all the credit goes to Reba and Ronnie because they got together and started talking about, we love this damn song. Let's just go in and figure out and demand a way to make it work. And the only way they could make it work was they were going to both working on new albums, and Reba's album was going to be called If You See Him. Brooks and Dunn's album was going to be called If You See Her, and they were going to release them on the same day. That's the way it worked out. That's what they decided to make everybody happy. And then the albums came in at 1 and 2 on the chart. Reba at 1 and Brooks and Dunn at 2. And it was like, damn, I might get to keep my house now. It was one of those kind of moments. And I go on to say I might even take the wheels off of it now, really, because it was such a big moment. But it's like, and that just goes back to my days. If you ain't lived in a trailer, you're really not living, So, but yeah, it was wonderful for all the things that have almost happened, and that happens a lot. If you're in the hunt and doing good stuff and songs recorded, then you're getting a lot of rejection still. Songs that just didn't make it. Something got bumped out. I've had that with George Strait. Like they're going to go in and cut my song tomorrow, and then I'd lose out to a Dean Dillon song or whatever, But it was a glorious moment, man, when we found out that that's what was going to happen, and then the success. The song just, raced up the charts, and it went to number 1 and sat there for a couple of weeks. So it was just it was a beautiful thing, and it led to more opportunities and more good stuff with Ronnie and Brooks and Dunn. Kick's just the most supportive guy. Even when he wasn't writing with me and Ronnie, he was still so supportive, not jealous, didn't look at me as a threat or anything. He was just very supportive and just glad to have me out there. He's just a very steady, stable kind of person where a lot of people would not maybe handle that as well. Because in the beginning, he and Ronnie and other producers, they wrote almost everything. And then I came along, and Ronnie really started writing a lot of stuff with me. And of course, they went on to write Red Dirt Road. I was on the road. Ronnie's like, "Man, come out this week. I got a cool idea called Red Dirt Road." I went, "That's cool." Then by the time I got on the road, they already had the first verse and chorus written. And it kind of broke my heart because it was so wonderful. It was so well written. They didn't, they were too far into the song to bring me on. But I went, damn it, that's going to be a hit, Yeah. But fortunately, we came with a few more. Cowgirls Don't Cry came after that, and Play Something Country was their final number 1 song, and Ronnie and I wrote that, and yeah, it was a great experience. I mean, it really saved me, and it also gave me an outlet for an act that I could really connect with. If I wanted to sing something rangy, and Ronnie could do it. It really fit with what I like musically, and I think that's why we had as much success as we did. Didn't have to, force anything or try to make it something it wasn't. It just it worked. And then having the guy in the room that's going to sing the song, it certainly doesn't hurt a bit. He could take it in the direction it needed to be and say what you wanted to say because he was going to be singing it. So it was wonderful, and the friendship really continues to this day. I mean, like I said, we had a great little visit yesterday, and we just had a song that Music Cares is putting together, a thing that Rodney Crowell is doing, and they're going to include a song of ours on it. So that was that was kind of cool. One of those songs that we always liked, but nothing really ever happened. It never got recorded. But it's going to be part of this benefit fundraiser type thing. It's just full of cool artists from Elvis Costello to whoever. It's a good thing. So he had called to talk about that, and we ended up talking about a lot of other things. But there again, one of those friendships I made through the business that's just been, very fortunate that Ron was a fan of mine before I met him, and I was such a fan of his, I didn't even know that he would even know who I was. But his wife, Janine in particular, was a fan, and they both knew my music and bought the cassette, and it was a mutual admiration thing going on when we first got together. So that, I think Ronnie's sort of an introvert, and I think that made him kind of comfortable. He knew me and my music, and he respected kind of what I was doing. And I think that's all a part of what made our writing relationship, professional relationship, work even better than it may have with other people. He wasn't real open to people. He was kind of freaked out that I was coming on the road. He'd never had anybody out there before, and he almost canceled me before we went out, but he didn't. And then because he didn't, like I said, it turned into 13 years of a whole lot of fun and a lot of good songs that came out of it.
Yeah. I think like there's definitely one of those things where when you connect the dots, it makes sense that you guys would fit together, because if you go back to a lot of the 90s Brooks and Dunn stuff, there's a lot of like that Southwest imagery, a lot of those textures. I feel like it feels like, I know they had that record Borderline, but like a lot of those songs, they feel like they are happening in like bars down on the border, And I think a lot of the Solid Ground record specifically, like that feels very Southwestern-y and feels very much in that same world with a lot of those same textures. And of course, you mentioned like the pedal steel, like that was such a big thing. And you can hear that in a lot of the music that Brooks and Dunn was putting out, and that you guys were as well. So it makes a lot of sense when you connect all those dots.
Yeah, it does. You're right. And we even used a couple of the same players, speaking steel guitar, Bruce Boughton. He played on a lot of those Brooks and Dunn. He's the guy that played the cool little lick on Sacred Ground, little high little thing. And we actually took Bruce on the road with us early on. He was one of our very first steel players out there. Just had a great time with him. That'd be great. I hope I do make it out there at some point. Love to have you out and meet you in person. That'd be great too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We can. Yeah, I mean, I don't have a radio station, but my little podcast rig here is super portable. So I mean, we could even do a little.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah, that'd be great. Oh, absolutely, man. That'd be great. Hey, these podcasts are so much fun.
All right, that is it for this one. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks to Terry for the conversation and the stories. Again, be sure to share the Neon Eon with everyone you know who enjoys country music from the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Something I've dubbed the Neon Eon. We'll keep this fast-moving train rolling on next week with another great conversation with one of the era's early pioneering bands.